One thing I like to do whenever I get new jaws or a new chuck is take the jaws off Okay, one thing that can be a concern with any chuck, if you have opened it up, and you're gripping something in this area, you have this gap here, and I'm not sure about other chucks, but one-way chucks you can set them so that the jaws will extend beyond the body of the chuck. So you really have these edges out here. When you're working on something, your sleeve or something could get caught and snagged and pulled. So what I generally do is just file that sharp corner off, so it makes it less likely, not impossible, but less likely that will be able to grab onto anything, like if you're using a polishing rag to apply finish, or your sleeve or whatever. You just take that sharp corner off. Not that it's cut yourself sharp, but it's an abrupt corner, and you're not gripping anything with that part of the chuck, so this isn't affecting the ability of the jaws to do their job in any way. It's something that only takes a few seconds to do, and could stop you from getting hurt. So, in my opinion, it's worth taking the time to do it. And there, it's done. So the jaws, the one-way jaws, they're all identical. They all have this little hole. One of them has a little roll pin in that hole. So when you are mounting the jaws to the chuck body, you can decide whether you want that the jaw that has that roll pin can go over here, or it can go over here. Okay, if you put it, this has a short slot machined in the face of the chuck body. This has a long slot machined in the face of the chuck body. If I mount that jaw there, then when I open up the chuck, I get to there, and that's as far as it will go, because that pin has reached the end of the slot, and the jaw does not extend past the body of the chuck. If I mount it over here, where it was originally, it lets me open the chuck up further to there. So lets me grip something a little bigger, gives me more range of movement, but the chuck jaws are now extending beyond the body of the chuck and can be knuckle munchers. That slot also stops. If that pin isn't there, then it would be possible to keep opening the chuck, and you get to the point where these would disengage and could fly right out. And if it's spinning, you definitely don't want that to happen. These are the chuck slides, the base slides. And in those slots you can see the scroll plate, which is machined onto the front of this part. And it's just a spiral ridge and groove, sort of like a phonograph record. And that engages with the teeth on the back of the base slides and makes them go in and out when you rotate the scroll plate. Now, the base slides engage the groove on the scroll plate, and that's what makes them move in and out. But because of that, these grooves are not the same on all. These have to go in the right order, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so we got the number 1 machined into the face of the chuck beside this slot. So that tells me that the first base slide, and I should have mentioned when I was taking that apart, I took the first one out and put it here, the second one and put it there, the third one and put it there, and the last one and put it over there, so I know what order they came out in. So I want to make sure they go back in the same order. And if I look in this slot, I can see where that ridge starts. You can see that the outer thread, I guess you would call it, is just on this side of the hole there. So I want that right there. I push this in as far as it will go and rotate. And since that first thread is coming in this direction, that means that the next base slide is going to go in this slot. This is the one that came out of this slot. And I rotate, and I'm picking up that first thread again. And the last one. Okay, and just to ensure that I have got those in correctly, I'll spin it all the way closed, and they should meet in the middle. If I have mixed these up, they won't meet in the middle. So I would know I had a problem, and I'd have to go back and rearrange the order. And the actual jaws themselves, the only one you have to keep track of is the one with the pin in it, and you have to decide whether you want to put it in the long slot to provide the maximum adjustment range, or in the short slot to provide maximum safety. When you're putting them on and tightening them up, use some sort of sequence to ensure that you do not miss one. And when you're sure you've got them all tight, go back and do it once more, because you definitely don't want those jaws being loose. But then you also don't want to, you don't need to hire a gorilla to tighten them up either. They just need to be tightened down there with hand pressure. They don't need to be forced. So now that chuck is ready to go. One thing I neglected to mention, on the taper lock adapter there are two threaded holes. The intent, the reason for those holes is so you can put in a set screw to lock it onto your lathe spindle, so that if you're using it in reverse, it can't unthread itself. I would have thought that the set screws would come with the tool, but there don't seem to be any. And I don't know as I ever got any with any of my other chucks either, now that I think about it. I think I made some. I actually found a bolt that would fit those threads. And I can't remember how I held that while I was doing that, but it was either on the lathe or the drill press, and just filed the end into a cone, and then used a hacksaw to cut a slot so I can use a straight screwdriver to tighten or loosen the insert. I really find it odd that those are not included with either the insert or the chuck, but they don't seem to be, so if you need them, you'll have to provide your own.